My golden child sister borrowed $17,000 from me to start a business, but actually spent the money traveling and gambling. I took her to court over it, but my whole family sided with her. My sister recently came to me asking me to lend her $7,000 for a business investment. She already owed me $3,000, so at first I said no, but my parents forcefully pressured me into giving in. My sister promised to have it back to me within 6 months as she'd have her business up and running by then. However, the 6 months passed, and not only had she not even started her business yet, but she had actually spent the $7,000 on herself. She went traveling in Asia, bought a new gaming console, and gambled the rest away. I remember the day she came to me about it, her parents and mine with her. Apparently, she felt awful for how reckless she was with the $7,000 and wanted to make things right. In order to do this, she asked for another loan of $7,000, swearing that this time she'd start a business. I straight up laughed at her, but as I was in the middle of telling her no, my mom interrupted me. She screamed that family help each other out and started relentlessly pushing me into giving her the money. The memories of being ganged up on like this resurfaced, and as my parents, my mom and dad, and my brother all towered over me talking about lending her the money, I essentially let them bully me into giving my sister another $7. As the months went on, my sister, of course, never paid me back. I gave her another 6 months, and after that, I started pressing her about the now total $17,000 she owed me. Of course, my family defended her, saying I was overreacting and needed to give her time. This was unfortunately no surprise as growing up the difference between my sister and me was obvious. I remember being 16 and working long hours at a diner to save for my first car. I took every extra shift I could while my sister didn't have to work at all. On her 16th birthday, our family threw her a big party and gave her a brand new car with a huge red bow on top. It wasn't just the car that bothered me, it was how the family treated her. They acted like my sister deserved the world, while no one seemed to notice how hard I worked. When I finally saved enough to buy a used car, there was no celebration. It felt like my effort didn't matter. One Thanksgiving, my sister casually mentioned crashing her car while racing with friends. Instead of being upset, my family laughed and brushed it off. My dad even wrote her a check to cover the repairs. If that had been me, I'd have been grounded for months. It was always like that. When my sister struggled in school, they hired tutors and blamed the teachers. When I had trouble, I was told to figure it out on my own. My sister got everything handed to her while I had to work for everything I had. The family saw her as special while I was just expected to manage on my own. My mom told me to be patient. My sister has always come through for the family, and she'll come through for me too. Sure. My sister had helped family members before. She'd paid off my mom's overdue credit card bill once and even covered my cousin's rent when she lost her job. Everyone loved to remind me of that as if those small favors made her some sort of hero, but what they conveniently forgot was that my sister never had to worry about her own bills. My dad had always handled her car payments, and my mom paid her credit card debt when it got too high. Her college tuition, fully covered. She never had the stress of budgeting, of choosing between paying the electric bill or the rent. Of course, she could come through when she didn't have real responsibilities weighing her down. My sister would swoop in and throw a few $100s at someone now and then, but no one had ever given her anything like the $17,000 total I'd loaned her. That was a whole different story. She was always the one offering help, not the one owing it. No one had ever asked her for anything this big. And now that I had, she couldn't handle it. Then there was the confrontation. I gathered up the family and asked my sister for the money in front of everyone. I looked around the room for some form of support when I made my statement, but all I got were blank stares. My father gave me a shrug. My sister, on the other hand, just sat there, looking smug. Her hands folded in front of her like she had nothing to answer for. My mom that she paid the credit card for broke the silence and said that I was overreacting and that family isn't just about money. She said I was causing a rift over something trivial and that we'd all miss each other if one of us had died. She loved pulling the if I were dead card, but this wasn't about that. I needed my money, and she treated it as if it were spare change. I had worked hard to save up that money. I sacrificed nights out with friends, put in overtime shifts at both jobs, and budgeted every meal, and here was my family, acting like it was no big deal that my sister had essentially taken my hard-earned savings and used them to fund her lavish lifestyle. I said that she promised to pay it back, and it's been 6 months with nothing but excuses. My sister leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and told me that the money was tied up. She said the same thing that she'd been telling me for months. As soon as the deal goes through, I'll get it back with interest. She asked me to trust her. I did trust her, but every time I asked for an update, she had another excuse. Meanwhile, she was out here living her best life while I was sitting here wondering if I'd ever see that money again. Before my sister could respond, my dad, who had been silent up until this point, told me that he was disappointed to see us act like this and said that my sister was doing something good for the future of the family, and in a couple of years, the $17,000 would mean nothing when we have $1 million and that I should be proud that I helped her out early on. I felt my stomach drop. I told him it was fine and left it there. I knew that I was only wasting my time talking to them. I realized that my family wasn't going to help me, so I took matters into my own hands. Over the next few weeks, I stopped going to any family gatherings. Every time I thought about seeing them, my stomach twisted. I started collecting evidence of my sister's spending habits. I knew my sister was spending the money on luxurious things. And while her Instagram posts were public, I needed more. I needed solid proof, so I started digging. I looked into public records, tracked her purchases, and followed up on her so-called business investments. What I found confirmed my suspicions. There was no business. My sister had used my $17,000 to buy a luxury car, take a couple of extravagant vacations, and furnish her new apartment with high-end furniture. The tech startup she had claimed to be investing in didn't even exist. With this information, I decided to consult a financial investigator. It was a tough decision because it meant involving a stranger in family matters, but I didn't see another option. The investigator was able to track my sister's spending even further and provided detailed reports that laid out exactly where my money had gone. As I looked at the final report, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that I finally had concrete proof, anger that I had let it get this far. But now, I had something undeniable. My plan was to present it to my family to finally get them to see the truth. When I called for another family meeting, I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I thought maybe with the evidence in hand, they would finally believe me. I was wrong. Sitting around the same dinner table, I presented everything, including the investigator's report, the public records, and screenshots of my sister's lavish spending. I even had a timeline that outlined how, from the day I loaned her the money, my sister had been using it for personal gain. At first, the room was quiet. I expected shock and maybe some apologies for not believing me sooner, but what I got instead was disbelief. My mom said that couldn't be right and that my sister wouldn't do anything like that. My sister tried to play it off. Some of the money went toward business expenses, and she spent some of it on herself, but that's just how business works, she explained. She said she had to look successful to be successful. I confronted her again and told her that she took my money under false pretenses and used it for her own benefit. That's fraud. At the word fraud, the room tensed. My father's face turned red. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and my mother just stared at my sister as if waiting for her to make it all better with some magical explanation. My sister again tried to explain, saying that she needed to invest in herself as well. Even if she got carried away, she said she would pay back every dime, but the damage was done. The evidence was clear. My sister had lied, and now everyone in the room knew it. I thought I had her. She was playing checkers while I was playing chess, but even after everything they heard and had seen, my family continued to side with her. They refused to fully hold her accountable. My dad sighed, rubbing his temples. He was clearly frustrated. He wanted me to understand my sister was under pressure and that she was just trying to make something of herself, and mistakes happen, but this wasn't a mistake. My sister didn't accidentally take my money and forget to pay it back. She lied to me, took what I worked hard for, and had no intention of returning it. Then my mom gave me a sad look as if I was the one in the wrong. She didn't side with me. Instead, she hinted that maybe I should have given my sister more time. After all, my sister wouldn't hurt me on purpose. Her words hit harder than I expected. How could they still see her as the victim? I was the one left hanging, but they acted like I was causing the problem. It wasn't about giving her time. It was about trust, and my sister had shattered that. My dad let out a heavy sigh, and for a second, I thought he might finally understand where I was coming from. But no, he just reminded me that family is more important than money. They didn't want this to tear us apart. I stood up, feeling the weight of it all. I couldn't keep fighting them or keep pretending everything was okay. The next day, I went to my lawyer and filed a lawsuit against my sister for fraud. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only one I had left. My family had chosen to protect her at my expense, and I wasn't going to let that slide. I had worked too hard for that money to let it slip away without a fight. Once my lawyer served her the papers, I knew that this would lead to my family disowning me. The lawsuit turned the family upside down. My sister, who had been avoiding me for months, suddenly couldn't stop calling. She begged me to drop the case and promised she'd find a way to pay me back. When that didn't work, she'd lash out, accusing me of ruining her life. But I wasn't buying it. I'd heard her excuses too many times before, and I knew better now. My parents were furious. They didn't care about the money anymore. To them, I was the one destroying the family, but I wasn't backing down. The court proceedings dragged on for months, with my sister's lawyer trying to paint me as unreasonable. During the trial, I was shocked when my dad took the stand to defend my sister. He was there to testify that the money I had loaned her was given in good faith, not a loan at all, but for support. He claimed my sister had made efforts to get other family members to invest in her business too, as if that somehow justified everything. He said that I was one of the many who offered the money since I knew that starting a tech company would need a lot of startup capital. I remember my sister coming to me and asking if I wanted to be part of it, my dad said, looking directly at the judge. She told me about the business, about how it was going to take off, and she just needed help from family. We all knew she was doing something important for her future. This wasn't a part of some scam. He made it seem like I was one of the many, but none of the others had actually given her money. That part was left out. The whole thing was framed as if my sister had been doing the right thing and I had simply misunderstood the situation, but the evidence spoke for itself. They didn't know that I had all the messages between us that showed her saying that she would pay me back. Between this, the investigator's report, my sister's spending records, and her own inconsistent testimony, it all pointed to one thing: fraud. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. My sister was ordered to repay the full amount plus interest and was fined for her fraudulent actions. I wish that the court ruling brought some sense of closure, but the truth is my relationship with my family was forever changed. They apologized, of course, once the ruling came down, but their apologies felt hollow. They had chosen my sister over me when it mattered.